Hi, I'm Darlene Carman.
And I'm Doug Carman.
Welcome to the show. We met Julia Bell at the recent Succulent Gardens Extravaganza in Watsonville. Her rock wall display filled with succulents in all colors of a sunset caught our attention. The balance, rhythm, and design clued me in to her background in fine art. Her formal education includes landscape and graphic design, horticulture, botany, architecture, engineering technology, and more. On today's show, she will give us ideas on how we can renew our parched gardens with new vitality. Hey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Julia. How you doing?
Hi.
How did you get involved with Robin Stockwell of Succulent Gardens?
You know, it was a little sneaky. I initially applied for a job there. I was looking at their newsletter and they announced that they were expanding, and that sounded exciting to me. So I wanted to go talk to him. So I applied and got an interview, but I was also interviewing him to see how I could collaborate with him. I was really excited about the succulent globe that he created a few years back.
I love that. That's awesome.
Yeah,
Awesome.
incredible work.
Yeah.
So I thought that I needed to meet the man behind that and get to play with some succulents.
So that was your first year then, and then you got the extravaganza, you got invited to do that?
That was actually just 6 months ago that I first started talking to him, and it became clear that rather than actually work at the nursery, we would start collaborating together, and I started pitching ideas.
Well,
the way it worked, huh?
he actually must have had a lot of faith in or loved what your ideas were, because a lot of the displays you were quite heavily involved with. We have some pictures, so let's see what happened at that event. We can quickly show those.
Yeah.
Can we see those pictures? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so that was what I call the corner garden. That was my first redesign. That's before, and the next picture is what I transformed it into.
That's the after?
Yes.
Okay. Wow.
And we also did the rock wall in front of it that incorporates benches. And then the next picture is a retaining wall as it was. And I felt that that could use a little bit of help,
Definitely.
that whole section. And so the next picture there is how we started to transform it. We added a stairway. And the next picture shows the succulents that we planted into that you just were talking about.
Yes.
We call that the Echeveria explosion. The next picture is another shot of that as well. Long linear planting. And the next picture shows another area I identified as a place that needed a little bit of help. That's the bathroom, and you know, people spend time visiting that, but I thought it could use an update. So the next picture is me in front of a live floral design display that I created for the event, and I started working on some arrangements live to interact with during the event.
Wow.
And that is actually the cement before picture. And
that's later. That's not to do with the event, right?
No,
so
that's not at the
Let's look at that a little bit later.
And that's an update of that. Yes.
We'll look at that later.
I have a question. Will they be dismantling the all the work that you did?
No, they'll be leaving it up for about a year. Yeah, that's the arrangement. We're going to be working with master gardeners, and they're going to document the process.
So now, is this all of the displays for the other people? You had about, maybe 7 different people there?
I believe so, yes.
Something like 7 people, different people, and they were all wonderful.
Yeah.
And so they're going to leave all of them up so they can actually study them. What do they hope to find out?
I think it's going to provide really interesting information in terms of the density of the plantings. It'll also show the visions that we all had as we were planting them. It's a unique opportunity not only to produce a show garden, but it's more like a landscape that is going to grow over time and flourish. And Robin, the owner, he was trying to highlight that. He knows that we work that way in our minds, and it's not just about the first day that you plant it, but the years to come.
Well, that's going to be very exciting then for you to be,
yes,
you know, find out really what's going on.
Absolutely.
Did they do that for his globe? They should have did they document that really
I
well?
believe they did. Yeah.
It
was incredible.
I hated to see that go down. I really did.
Yes.
But I understand he won't say a thing, but I understand he's working on something, so just,
it's true,
you know.
top secret, but there's really exciting projects under works at the gardens.
Do you know what it is?
I do. I'm not allowed to say.
I know. Well, I'm really excited to find out how you transformed a 10-foot patch of like dead lawn that we had in our yard. And so let's see some of the material, the plant material that you had to work with.
Yeah, there's a
we have
blank
some
canvas.
pictures on those.
Yeah, pictures? You can tell us what we have, what we're looking at, because some of these things I don't know, I just buy them. Okay, there's the 10-foot patch of dead lawn.
There's our blank canvas.
Which we let go because of the drought. We just stopped watering.
Okay.
And this is what I picked as the showcase, and you didn't actually know what this plant was.
No.
So
it's rare.
It is rare. It's
Really?
It's probably Euphorbia lambii. Without knowing a little bit more about it. But these are tree succulents, and they can get to be probably 10 feet tall.
The person I got it from, but he never knew the name. He said, "I'll get that for you," and he never did.
Yeah.
And it's a little bit lanky, but it's quite nice.
I think once you put that in the ground, it'll fill out. And this as well, that is probably only a couple feet wide right now. It's a fan aloe. That's going to get to be 10 feet wide eventually.
Oh my God.
Yeah, so it's good to know these sizes before you go ahead and put them in the ground.
She bought that and said, "Oh, I like this. I want that."
They're beautiful plants.
I never believed it.
Yeah, this is a type of crassula. It's often called miniature pine tree, but that's looking like it's going to go a little bit bigger to me.
It's a jade.
It is a jade.
It's a jade.
It is a type of crassula.
It's like a tree jade.
And that could get to be about 6 feet tall, possibly.
Wow.
Depending on what variety. So
wow.
That's one of my favorites. This is the spiral aloe.
I love that.
I love those. And I would actually recommend keeping that in a pot possibly, or being very careful when you plant it.
Because
good drainage is very key for those.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And next, that's an aeonium, and I love that plant for the brilliant color, the dark burgundy, and that would be a nice filler element.
It's very leggy, though. It's gotten very leggy, and some workmen broke it off, and it never did come back in that particular spot. And so it's a little bit leggy, as you can see, so I'm not doing something correct.
Well, once that's in the ground, again, all of these plants will take on a new life. This is another color of the same variety of aeonium, possibly. Again, these are all somewhat
climbing
loose
out of its
identifications.
Yeah. Well, it's climbing out of its pot.
Yes.
I mean, there is a pot there. Something, something else took over, and it's really climbing out of the pot.
Well, by putting these in the ground, this jade too, you can really spread these around and create a lot of unity. That's one of the things I love about succulents is you can.
I have a ton of jade. You know, I paint with it,
there's
so
probably
I have many different
few
varieties.
more pictures coming. And then this is the donkey tail. That's going to be a good filler as well. So
that's a filler plant.
That's a filler as well. And
we have a lot of those around.
There's a lot of those in there.
Well, I think everybody's familiar with that particular one.
Absolutely.
You know, it's something that we all would recognize.
Yes. And it's also something that's good for putting in pots.
Ah.
I always find that it's nice to have elements that trail over because pots really can show that off. I don't know if you've heard the trifecta of the thriller, which is often the tall, amazing thing, the filler, which obviously fills, it can have color, and then the spiller. And those are all good elements to have in a pot arrangement, and it's also something that I use in landscape design because you can create these vignettes around your yard.
So you recommend to anybody that's considering putting succulents in their yard to think about incorporating pots and potted plants to put in.
Absolutely.
To help,
It really helps add structure and gives your eye a resting place.
Now, I actually sent you a lot more pictures.
Absolutely.
You know, and my point was that this is hodgepodge of plant material that people collect. You buy it here and there, and then you put it here and there. Somebody gives it to you. In my case, I get a lot of people that are moving, and then I get their plants. So, so that's why you just have this mixture of plants. So, what was your thinking for putting it into this 10-foot kind of patch of dirt?
Yeah.
What was your thinking?
I always identify the tallest plants first, the things that are going to get the biggest.
Okay.
So that's why I went through and just tried to identify all of your plants and do some research. Just find out how big that's going to get in a certain amount of time. Because you really want something to look like a nice composition when you're first putting it in. That's very important. But a landscape designer can also see how that transforms over time. So that's why I picked the 3 most important tall plants and created the composition around that. Everything else starts to find its place filling in, and all of your smaller ones, those can be grouped together, and I almost like kind of creating repeating rhythms of them because you can break them up endlessly and repeat it and tie them together.
Now, would you stick with the 10-foot, like, was that a rectangle? Maybe. Would you stick with that, or would you make it a circular thing, or how would you design that in your mind? Would you keep it to a circular, or would you continue that in the yard if you were going? I mean, I just gave you a small part of it.
I often start answering that question by trying to find out a little bit more about my client's style. A little bit more information about the architecture is how I would also start to delineate the border and the style of the garden. If you had a very modern home, I would probably want to do a very simple border. But if your garden and your home was a little bit more rustic, then I would probably go a little softer. Yeah. And I think that the plant forms, they lend themselves to a lot of different layouts and styles. Yeah.
So if somebody was going to try to do that on their own, would you recommend, like, you said grouping them? I think that's important. I think Robin talked about that as well, too, grouping them. But would you plant them all at one time and then see how they work, or a little? Because I know that they do get big once they're in the ground.
Yes.
And
I often would start with the biggest ones and locate those and get them in the ground. And step back and take a look. I have a very organic design process, and I like to just get material in and start playing around with it. And that often answers the question of where things go right there. You can just see where it looks right.
Well, I mean, you plant it in the ground, and
well, you put the biggest material there first in the ground, and then you have all your other little filler plants, and that's when you kind of work backwards from your larger plants.
It's almost like you're doing a flower arrangement, kind of.
It's true.
In a way.
Yes.
Well, with succulent, let's say for a yard, I think I've noticed a lot of them have a lot of pathways in that, and they incorporate a lot of either rock pathways or slate or something, and you mix that in. So you take a lot of that into consideration, so with the type of plants, and so that the people can walk around them, because obviously if you have a big lawn, you walk across the lawn, but you can't have let's say a barrier, just a stark barrier. So with a large yard, I would imagine you want pathways, and that would lead to different plants.
Definitely. I think
them.
that helps with the structure as well, the overall layout of it. It's broken up because succulents can start to look a little busy. And even if your eye has a place to move through a landscape, that can help. And of course, you need to walk through it to enjoy the plants and also to take care of them.
Yeah. And now, so far, I haven't had any problem with frost. On the ones that I showed you, is there anything I have to worry about for the wintertime?
You know, I often keep my eye on the projected temperatures and cover my plants.
You do cover them?
I do cover them.
With plastic?
Actually, not with plastic. It's good to have them breathe. I'll even put a bamboo stick next to it, insert it in the ground so that there can be a tent over it. Oh. Yeah. But that's another really good thing about researching your plants. I always provide my clients with a list of not only how big it's going to get, but the frost tolerance. Very important. So you know what to run out and cover before it's just melted away in the frost.
Well, in this area, many of the succulents have problems with frost?
Absolutely.
Well, sure they do.
Absolutely.
And I remember in the old days, being in pots, I would grab them. Remember that? I'd grab them and bring them inside. If the TV said there was going to be a frost, I'm running outside the last minute.
Remember that?
Then I finally started just leaving them, making a nice arrangement in the house. You know, I got tired of going back and forth. But that's the way I used to handle it. But they always said you could cover it with plastic or burlap or even paper bags, I heard.
Yeah. I would go with something more breathable, like the paper or a cloth, any sheet, that works as well. And they do sell frost cloth. Yeah.
Well, I was quite surprised at the event to learn that succulents are found throughout all kinds of climates. I thought they were just kind of like in the desert, but that's not true at all, is it? I was, yeah, and that was brought up at the event.
Different types.
Yeah, different types of succulents and in a variety of climates.
Yes.
They do quite well. So
they're very adaptable.
Let's talk a moment about this strawberry pot over here. You said that you would actually use that in the design. Would you consider this a medium-sized plant then? Would this be a tall or a medium?
I would consider this a focal point, but it would also go in front of some of the taller plants.
Okay.
It's nice to plant something that can get a little bit taller in the top, but again, that's where it's really important to know how big your plants are going to get, because they can start out very small. We have some examples right here of.
So these would be ideal types that would go into to the side.
But you do have to be careful, because this one in front, that's a baby of one of the plants that we saw,
that's
and
the one
that gets
lengthy.
about
They
3
have a
feet
long
tall.
stem.
So it wouldn't have a very long life in that pot. So it's really good to consider that. Same with this one in front, that gets huge, whereas this little one behind, tiny. So that would be more appropriate. I think it's really important to read the tags and understand what it's going to look like in a year, and
now,
not just when you buy
inside that
it.
pot, you have a trick.
Yes.
Tell us about that. We've still got about 10 minutes left. I'd like to hear a little bit about that.
Yeah. So when I water strawberry pots, I find that the water often just drains right out.
Yeah.
So I've started using PVC, and you put
There's
it.
holes.
Yeah, there's holes.
in it.
And so there's actually a cap on the bottom of it. And you know, as a landscaper, I have plenty of this leftover lying around my house, but it's not expensive to buy this kind of thing either. And I did drill a hole in the bottom because you don't want the water to sit. So all of this goes at the center of the pot so that you can water directly into that, and then it waters from the core of the pot and soaks the medium from within instead of running out the sides.
So it gets all the lower.
And you put the dirt all around it just like it was a plant itself.
Absolutely, and I'll
just
usually
ignore it.
cap it with a little rock, or you can just cap it with another piece of PVC. I like the natural look, but I just hide it and then take it off when I'm watering it.
And the cap is to make it more steady in the bottom? Is that the purpose of having the cap?
The cap on the bottom is to slow the water down so it goes out the side instead of straight down.
Instead of straight down,
Right.
sure.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, so here you would pick out several then?
Yes.
You would pick out several, I mean, you have such an assortment.
I do, yeah.
What I do remember I only had a strawberry pot once, and I don't remember what I planted, but it could have been herbs. And I just remembered that they do want to fall out of they want to just climb out of the pot. So the technique, are you suggesting that you do more pruning? I didn't do any pruning. So more pruning to keep it.
That would be one way to keep them in size. That's another way that you can also make more plants for your garden by keeping on pruning them. Free plants. But if you know something is going to get a little bit taller and you have to have it in your pot, just put it in this top part, and then that's like a normal pot. Or some of these more spilling varieties are a little bit more appropriate. Some of the ones that make rosettes, I think that those look lovely hanging off of the sides.
Oh, yeah. And the colors, you have such a assortment of colors here.
Yes.
Now, years ago, before we had the lawn that we saw, that's not very, you know, nice right now, but before we had that, we had this big concrete patio. It's huge, and we got tired of it. We wanted to get rid of it, so we did. But you have some other techniques that you use instead of just getting rid of the whole thing. So tell us about that. In fact, I don't know if we'll be able to find that picture that was.
Well, it was shown earlier. One option that I came up with is I ran across just a cement slab that was too thick to take out the entire thing. So we cut channels through it. And in those channels, we were able to plant some succulent ground covers and also put in some other more interesting stones. And those integrated some of the other materials that the clients were putting throughout their new construction. Just livened it up a little. And then to integrate the concrete even further, we actually stained it. And you can buy, it's like paint. It's a latex paint. There's several different varieties.
So instead of like saying, okay, we're going to tear out this whole patio, all this huge, immense concrete, you can actually break it up, leave it there, but then take out channel, plant it ahead of time, and then plant it with succulent.
We have the picture of it.
Yeah.
It just disappeared, but we did have we had a picture of that, and you stained it. It was kind of a orange.
Yeah, it just really livens up the material and makes it more interesting and more integrated. And also, it hid the cracks that had developed. Those were the parts that we cut out because concrete does crack over time.
Sure it does.
But also by making it look a little bit more natural, you can kind of work with those nuances because you find cracks in natural rock.
Sure you do.
But it just looks more intentional.
So were your customers happy with that?
Absolutely. They loved it.
But you know, that was
and
a great idea.
they didn't have to have the expense of having all that concrete.
I think they loved that as well.
I remember that. I
away,
remember taking that out.
Oh, huge.
It was awful.
Oh,
so I liked your idea. So you have a lot of ideas then that you can change things and around where you don't have to, you know, they're like tricks. You don't have to like get rid of something.
Absolutely.
Any other tricks do you have?
Well, I think that's the key to good design. You're just solving problems in an artistic way. And I think that I really enjoy using the repurposed materials because it gives me this sense of reducing waste. The concrete's a great example of that. I also started using brake rotors, of all things. Brake rotors, just metal discs. And they're an interesting structural element, and I actually incorporated them into some of my work at the succulent gardens. And they just kind of provide a fun little, almost modern twist, and people are throwing them out all the time.
I have to see that.
Yeah.
You'll have to show me that. I mean, I'm having a little trouble visualizing that. But that's a good trick. So you're trying to find things that might be laying around or people have and
Absolutely.
just so that's a really good idea.
So the drought, in many respects, has given people an opportunity to plant out some whole new garden, a whole new look to their yard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
And
great.
they take it as a challenge.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people were concerned about it affecting our industry in a negative way, but I think by being creative and using drought-tolerant materials such as succulents, it's really actually been an interesting chance to think outside the box and think outside the lawns. And some municipalities are actually giving rebates. So a lot of my clients are able to get some money back per square foot if they're taking out their lawn and putting the drought tolerance in. It's exciting.
Or the artificial turf.
That as well.
Do you like that?
You know, I have mixed feelings. We have incorporated that into some of our designs. And one of my favorite things to do is break it up by putting stepping stones through it, because it just looks a little bit more natural, a little bit less plain.
We have considered that, but we haven't.
I'm still considering it. I think I would have to have just a little bit and see how it goes. I have heard some, or read some negative things about the drainage and so forth. But
if it's
it definitely has a life expectancy of like 10 years.
Absolutely.
but I don't think my lawn lasted that long. It's like,
Yeah.
Now, how about some advice or pet peeves that you have that you'd like to tell gardeners? You've got your form right here.
You know, I always caution people about zone denial. And what that means is not understanding where you live and working with the parameters. We can't necessarily have a tropical landscape without really planning it out. You just can't grow any plant that might thrive in Hawaii. It's beyond just the drought. It's every little thing about where we live. It's just not the same. And people do come back from vacations and they want to grow a plumeria. And I don't blame them. Everything's gorgeous in Hawaii, but you can find plants here.
Yeah, that's one advantage to we learned at the event, that you can leave your succulents for several weeks and not worry about it. You give them a good watering before you go, and then if you take off for 4 weeks, you come back and they're still nice and healthy, and just add water a little bit. Yeah, that was great, because we had problems when we left on a long trip and we lost a lot of plants.
Yeah, it's just like, well, this has been so much fun. I really want to thank you so much for being here and giving us some ideas what we can do. And I would just like to tell everyone out there, do not give up on your yard, because if you just give it a little bit of work, and if you give it a little care, love, whatever it is that you do, and give it a fresh look, it can do wonders. And for more gardening ideas, check out Julia's website, and keep planting, be happy. Thanks for watching the show. Watch again. Yeah.